How y'all doing? I know this cat right here. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to your lovely campus here. This is a great school you've got here. It's really hip campus. Y'all printing money here? What's going on here? So, okay, very good. But thank you so much for inviting me. This is really great. So, you know, I'm a Kansas guy. How many of y'all grew up in Kansas? Okay, most of y'all, yeah. So I'm a Kansas guy. I grew up in Junction City, Kansas, or right down the road a piece. Anybody been through Junktown? Okay, that's what we can call it, Junktown. Y'all can't call it that. I can call it that though. So as a kid, you know, when I was kind of, you know, a little younger than y'all, as a kid, I loved movies. Went to the movies all the time. Back in the old days, they had double features, and so you could get 2 movies for the price of 1. So I went to the movies about every weekend. Love movies. And one of the first movies that I really started to pay attention to was a movie called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Anybody know The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? Yeah, Clint Eastwood, spaghetti western, Sergio Leone, director. And I remember I went, you know, I asked my mother for my birthday. I said, I want the soundtrack to this movie. And she's like, what? You want the soundtrack to this movie? And it's an Italian film, and it's wow, wow, wow. You know, guys know that thing? Yeah. And so I remember my mother taking me, there was a store called Gamble's back in the days, and she took me to the store called Gamble's, and she bought me this album, and my brother, years later, my brother told me, I knew then you were weird. But then, you know, really it was Gordon Parks who really kind of had the big influence on me. So, you know, as a kid, again, we watched movies all the time, and there was a kind of a behind-the-scenes story they did on television about the making of The Learning Tree. Has anybody seen The Learning Tree? Learning Tree Gordon Parks was the first black director to get to make a studio film. And Gordon Parks is from Fort Scott, Kansas. Fort Scott, Kansas. Little poo-butt town like Junction City, right? So Kansas, the first person to win an Academy Award, Hattie McDaniels, is from Wichita, Kansas. So Kansas has always had this kind of important place in film in many ways. I mean, the first really kind of established black filmmaker, Oscar Micheaux, is buried in Great Bend, Kansas. So we've had a beautiful legacy of black film in this state, and so I'm glad. I'm just really proud to be kind of a part of that. So growing up in Junction, we went to the movies every weekend. When I saw the making of The Learning Tree on television, and there Gordon Parks was. He's a cowboy hat. It's his brother. He's got this pipe. He's on a horse. I said, man, I want to be that dude. And then he directed the movie Shaft, not the one with Samuel L. Jackson. The first Shaft, which is 1971 with Richard Roundtree. And you got to remember, for me growing up at that time, you know, we never got black heroes. We never got black heroes. And Sidney Poitier was really kind of the first black hero you got. And Sidney was great. But in most movies, you know, the black characters, especially the black men, always died. They never got the girl. They never got the money. And so it was always frustrating as a kid because, you know, growing up in movies like I did, you know, I knew this. I knew it's like you expected, you know, the hero to get the girl and to get the money and to, you know, be the dude, right? And so we never got to be that guy. And so when Shaft was made, when Gordon Parks made Shaft, it was huge because we got the girl, we got the money, and you got to live in the inn, right? And so the trailer to Shaft, I should show you that trailer, but the trailer to Shaft it ended on this line, if you want to see, it's rated R. If you want to see Shaft, ask your mama. but you know, guys, you know, who wants to ask their mama to go to an R-rated movie, right? Especially when you know the guy's gonna get the girl, right? And so you just didn't want to do that, right? So anyway, it was those movies. It was great. It became blaxploitation movies, and blaxploitation movies were films that really kind of gave black people what we always had wanted, and so we got to win. We got to get the girl. We got to get the money, and that was a huge thing for us. And so growing up in Junction, I was able to see one of these movies every week. There was a new black film every week. And that was a huge thing for me. And so I always wanted to make films, but you know, how do you get from Junction City to making movies? And so I wrote plays instead. I wrote plays. And one of the things I learned from writing plays was that when I wrote a play, I then expected to do it. So I didn't write a play and then just like, oh, so I wrote this play and I'll put it on the shelf here. It's a really cool play. No, when I wrote a play, I was planning on producing that play. I mean, I would get my buddies together and we would sell tickets and I'd rent a theater and we would make that play. And the best thing that I learned from that was that you don't wait and get permission. You don't ask for permission. When you have something you want to say, when you have art you need to express, when you got this thing that's inside of you want to do, just do it. Find a way to do it. Find a way to do it, right? And so that's the thing that really kind of was a lesson, a really important lesson for me growing up, was just doing these plays. And so when I got to college, I went to a little small college called Marymount College in Salina, Kansas, that little poo butt town. And poo butt is kind of a thing that runs in my life a lot. So, Salina was great because it was very much like this school here. It's a small school, great professors. You could find your voice. You could find a way to tell your story. You could find a way to say the things that were important to you. And that's the thing that I got from college. I think it's really, really important when you go to college to have an agenda for yourself. Go to college with an agenda. So my agenda at Marymount was I wanted to learn how to write plays, and I wanted to become an actor, and I wanted to learn how to do these things. I wanted to learn how to direct. And so I was able to get that from Marymount. And it was a great experience. It was me and the basketball team, right? It was the only black people there, me and the basketball team. But it worked for me because I didn't wait for permission. I was doing my thing, right? When I would have to go get guys from Junction City to be in my plays at Marymount. I mean, they weren't even students at Marymount. I just go get them and say, you're gonna be in this play at my college, man. Come on, man, get in the car, let's go. And and so that same approach is the same approach I took when I started to try to make films myself. So when I wrote a screenplay, I knew I was going to make this film if I needed to. It would be great if I could sell it, right? It'd be great, but you really can't start out kind of making movies and selling movies. I mean, it's a long process, right? So I really started to write these movies and then make them. And so I went to, I got my MFA, my grad degree from NYU, New York, the film school there. And so that's where I learned to write a screenplay. So when I went to school there, my agenda was, I'm going to learn how to write a screenplay. And so when I graduated, of course, the discussion was, because you go to NYU to get into the industry. You get to NYU because, USC, NYU, those big schools, the idea is that you go there and then you've got an avenue to get into the studio system. So when I graduated, the guy said, my buddy said, where are you gonna go, man? You going to New York? You gonna stay in New York, going to LA? I said, no, man, I think I'm going back to Kansas. So what the hell is he thinking about, right? And I went back to Kansas because at that time, they weren't making the kind of black movies that I wanted to make. So the scripts I was sending their way, they weren't getting any love. So I said, I I can't wait for these people to figure it out. I can't wait for these people to figure out that I'm a pretty good writer. You know, I didn't know, I think I was a great writer, but I thought I was a pretty good writer. I was still learning, I was still trying to figure stuff out. So in many times, you can't wait for people to figure it out. You have to believe in yourself enough, and you can't be afraid. You can't be afraid. So I went back home. I had 2 kids. I had 3 kids at the time. 3 kids. You know, we got in a Ryder truck, and you know, I shouldn't tell you this, but I did this. This is how crazy my ass is. So I didn't have any money, moving back, and I was going back to make my first film, 9th Street. And there was, the reason I picked Lawrence was because the day after had been shot there. So I was trying to figure stuff out. It's like, well, how am I going to do this? And so Lawrence, the day after it was shot there, that was a big movie back in the 80s. And then I looked at the Kansas Film Commission directory. I was living in New York then. And I was trying to find who in Lawrence could maybe help me make my first film. And I saw a name said Sam Haskins in Lawrence. So I called that numbers, cold call, didn't know this person from Adam. Cold call, and it was a woman, Samantha Haskins. And she said, yeah, you know, come on down. And she introduced me to a guy named Tim Redman. And so I moved my family back to Lawrence, on the belief I was going to be able to make this film. Had no money, no nothing. So I got the Ryder truck, and you know those Ryder trucks, there's a little window back behind the cabin. So I couldn't put all my kids in the cabin. So I put the sofa right behind the window, and I put my 2 sons right behind the window back there. And so I loaded the truck up so that, you know, they were protected, but one box did fall on my son. And he still tells me about that today. It's like, you almost killed me, Dad. You know that, right? So I'm all messed up in the head because of you now. But we drove from New York to Lawrence, Kansas in that Ryder truck. And it's kind of an example of what you have to do when you got to do your thing, right? What you got to do when you got to do your thing. So I got here and really started to try to get my film made. My first film took me 9 years to make. 9 years to make. Took me four years to shoot it, and about another 5 years to finish it. And you know, that's how when you have no money, all you have is time. You know, then you don't know adage, time equals money. Well, when you have no money, you do have time. And so I stayed with it, and in the process of doing that, I got Martin Sheen to be in the film. You guys know who Martin Sheen is? Yeah, Martin Sheen. He was in Topeka making a film, and I was an activist as well. And I had an activist friend that was connected to him. And so I went to him on the set in Topeka where he was shooting a film. I said, man, I'd sure love to get you, maybe you could give us $500 or something for our film. He said, I'd rather be in your film. I said, I think we can work that out, you know. I think we can make that work, you know. So he stayed another day, and I wrote a scene for him. And so he plays a priest that was a mentor of mine in Junction City growing up. And then we got Isaac Hayes to be in the film. And Isaac Hayes, for those of y'all who don't know, for us growing up, he was black. First he was Black Moses, and then he was Shaft. He's the guy that he won the Academy Award for the soundtrack to Shaft. So getting him in my film was like, whoo! I had landed on Mars and just taken prisoners, right? So it took 9 years, but in the process, a lot of great things happened. And the thing about those 9 years, too, it was like that was really my film school, because I made a lot of mistakes and I did a lot of things right. And so during the course of all that, I really kind of figured things out. And so I made my film, and there was an article that came out about me making the film, and I mentioned in the film I wanted to write a script about John Brown, the abolitionist. And a buddy of mine, I didn't know him from Adam, he saw that article and he cold called me and said, I want to write a script about John Brown too. And he had just come back from Los Angeles. So here's a guy from New York, here's a guy from Los Angeles. His name is Mitch Bryant. He lives in Kansas City. And we got together and we wrote that script about John Brown, and we sold it to 20th Century Fox. And I had never been to LA. Never had been to LA when I sold my first script. I'll say it again. Never been to LA when I sold my script. And so you don't need to go there to do your thing. You just need to do your thing. And when I was first trying to make my film, folks would always say, well, you need to talk to Oprah. Get to Oprah. Oprah will help you. And don't try to get to Spike. If Spike knows what he will help you. They don't want to talk to you. But when you do your thing, when you go out and make your film, tell your story, make that invention you're thinking about, get the job that you're trying to do, whatever it is, when you do your thing, they end up calling you. So I made this film, CSA, Confederate States of America. And that film kind of grew out of the frustration I had with the Confederate flag flying over South Carolina. Really pissed me off. And so I said to myself, I need to make a film that really shows what the Confederate flag really means. Because, people, you see it on people's cars, right? You still see it on people's cars today, I always look at those dudes twice when I see it on their car. It's like, okay, is he gonna kill me or what, right? So I wrote this script and, again, had no money. At that time, I was teaching at KU at that point. And I should tell you, how I got the job at KU was Sam Haskins, the woman I cold called. She called me later and said, they're looking for someone to teach a class at KU. Would you be interested? That's how I got the job at KU. So you never know. You just never know. You just got to do your thing and keep reaching out, right? So I made this film, CSA, and great Hollywood story. So I made this film, and it's about the South winning the Civil War. And it shows what slavery would still be going on today, right? And so it's a pretty daring, challenging kind of movie. So I sent it to my agent, and my agent said, so what do you want me to do with this? Just like that. I clearly didn't get it, didn't like it, the whole bit. So the next week, I got into the Sundance Film Festival. And he said, Kevin, you're a genius. And that's how it works in Hollywood. There's a saying by William Goldman, a famous screenwriter, that no one knows anything in Hollywood. And what that means is that everyone in Hollywood is waiting to figure out what they know. So my agent didn't know the movie was good, but then Sundance liked it, and suddenly it was good. Someone knows something. So they're waiting for someone to tell them what they know. And so that's why you can't wait for your thing. You got to just do your thing and believe in yourself. You got to know what you're doing is the right thing, right? Know yourself. So that's how I met Spike. Spike and I had the same agent, and he heard about the film, and he said, I'd love to support the film. He'd love to see it, and he saw it. He said, man, I'd love to support the film. And so it's presented by Spike Lee. And then after that, he said, do you have any other scripts? And I said, I happen to have an extra script here, right? So one of the things I always tell my students is that when you get a break, you need to have more than one script. You need to have a couple more in the file here if you can, right? So that script was called Gotta Give It Up. And so I was in a play at Marymount called Lysistrata. Anybody know Lysistrata? So Lysistrata is an ancient Greek play. It's about women going on a sex strike to stop the men from going to war. So when I was in that play, I said, man, the language of the play was really hip, and it sounded like spoken word and rap and black folks. And I said, man, I think you could really adapt this and turn it into something maybe about gang violence today. So I wrote that script. It's called Gotta Give It Up. Spike really loved it. We tried to get it made. Jennifer Lopez was going to play Lysistrata, and this is before the Super Bowl. And so we went to all the major studios, Spike and I, to see if we could get this film made. And we had 2 readings for DreamWorks. the Spielberg company, and but nothing came together. So I went on to other movies. Spike went on to other movies, and I guess it's been about 6 years ago now. He gave me a call one morning. He said, "Do you still have that script?" I said, "Yeah, I still got it, man." He said, "Let's set it in Chicago and call it Chirac." And so we set it in Chicago, and it became the first movie for Amazon Studios. And so, and so the kind of continuing kind of line in my life has been just do your thing, right? Do your thing, know yourself, and don't be afraid. So with BlacKkKlansman, we got again, I got a call from Spike, and Spike said there's Jordan Peele gave him a call and said that that he's got a script called BlacKkKlansman. It needs a lot of work, but he thinks the story is really good, and so he sent us the book. So basically, how the process works when you adapt something, you first read the book, and then you read the book, kind of looking to see how you turn this book into a film. And so you kind of go through and highlight everything, and you highlight the stuff, the dialogue that's great, the scenes that are great. And then we had the script that the other two writers had written that they wanted to be rewritten. So so I go to Spike's place in his studio in New York, and we sit together, and you kind of map the whole movie out, and what's called a kind of a beat sheet. For any of you guys out there looking to become screenwriters, it's called a beat sheet, where you kind of design all the beats for the whole film. And one of the big problems with the story was that those of you who don't know, how many have you seen the film? Okay, most of you have seen it. So Ron Stallworth is a policeman, and was the first black detective in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And he was so naive and young at the time that he saw an ad for the Klan in the newspaper, and he wanted to, kind of find out what these guys were up to. So he cold called them and left a message, and they called him back because he left, and he used his real name, Ron Stallworth. So the Klan calls him up and says, "Hey, is Ron there?" And so now they know his name, and so from that, what happens is that he wants to try to infiltrate the Klan. Obviously, he can't infiltrate the Klan because he's black. Probably not a good idea. And so he gets a white policeman to play him in real life, and he continues to have a relationship with the Klan and David Duke on the phone. David Duke is the head of the Klan, very famous Klan guy. By the way, when I was at Marymount College, I was president of the student body, and David Duke wrote me a letter. And David Duke, at that time, had this organization called the NAAWP, the National Association for the Advancement of White People. You can't make this stuff up, right? And so I had this a new kind of David Duke a little bit. Anyway, so we get together and we kind of map this movie out. And the biggest challenge of the script really was that Ron Stallworth was a really good policeman. And so the Klan had planned to blow up a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs. And Ron was able to stop them. And so that was really not our film. So we turned it to the Black Student Union in our film. Which was very active at that time in Colorado Springs at Colorado College there, and so I told Spike, I said, "Hey man, I think this is a pretty cool idea," and never thinking ever in a million years that we would get nominated for an Academy Award, let alone win an Academy Award, right? So, thank you. So I guess one of the big kind of through lines of my life has just been just follow your beliefs. I tell my students it's not always right what you know, but it's also right what you believe in. And when you I've kind of always written what I believed in, try to tell stories about things I really cared about. One of the good things about doing that is that when you get tired, your belief system tells you to get your ass up and keep doing it, dude, right? And that's how you make a movie for 9 years. That's one film, work on it for 9 years. So that's all the people I know that really work in the industry, and I think this thing applies really to whatever you're trying to do in life. All the people I know that have succeeded in some way or another, they just didn't give up. They didn't give up. No matter what happened, they never gave up. And so I think that's just a big thing. And you know, criticism is a big part of kind of what you do as an artist, accepting criticism, taking criticism. And I always tell folks, when I read a review and I see the criticism is warranted or is fair, I will read that review, and because I want to know if I can make myself a little better. But when I read a review and I can see it's a hit job, and someone's just out to make you feel bad, you don't need that voice in your head. I'm especially talking to the young folks out there. You don't need negative voices in your head. If you're around negative people, my biggest, and it's so obvious, but we all do it, get away from negative people. I could only make these films I'm talking about because I was surrounded by guys and gals that wanted to do the same thing I wanted to do. And most times they didn't get paid working on my films. Most of the time we had to work crazy hours for long periods of time, years on one film. And so if you give them something that they can believe in, that they trust you with, that they can make them care about something, I think everybody wants something they can believe in. And we're all looking for that. And so when you can give someone that, people will stick with you and they'll help you reach your goal. So I really achieved my goals with a lot of help from a lot of people. And you know, I call it community filmmaking. We're like the black Amish raising the barn, you know? You know? So maybe I could take a few questions from you guys. Yes, ma'am.
It's hard. Is there a way?
I think they got a
Oh,
mic.
I'm sorry.
there for you,
You've done so many fine movies on different topics. Is there any plans for or are there any plans for any place where we can? I know certain places to go find different ones, like
Yeah.
the Planet Negro was on
Right.
Amazon. And what about some of the others, like?
Yeah, you know, I've been so busy working on movies that I don't have a place, like, I need a website. Can anybody make me a website? Can someone make me a website? Okay. I need a website. I need a website with all my movies on there. I think I've made like 6 or 7 movies now.
Right, right.
And these are all totally independent films. And I made quite a few documentaries too along the way. This Mark here has been in a couple of my movies. So yes, that I'm going to do that. So kind of be looking for it at some point.
Okay, I will do that.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes.
How involved is a screenwriter in the filmmaking process?
Well, you know.
Like shooting of the film and then connecting with the editing.
Sure. She was asking how involved is a screenwriter in the process of making the film and the final phases of it and so forth. Well, it kind of depends. Studio filmmaking is a lot different than independent filmmaking. So studio filmmaking, the writer has no power at all. So once you sell the script and they decide to make the movie, it's like, you know, unless they have rewrites they want you to do, you're kind of done. They might be nice enough to invite you to the set. So you know, you kind of get to just watch and say, good job, or man, this sucks, you know? Now independent film is different. Independent films can be big movies, but they're still technically kind of independent films. So independent films, often you have a little more participation in. And usually the director wants the writer around more and has to figure, there are a lot of times independent films have to do a lot of changes along the way because the budget is smaller. So the writer, it's much easier to change the script than it is to change, big production things. And so that's usually kind of the deal. Spike has been really nice to me in terms of, the rewriting process, and working with him has been great. It's really great to work with a director that has power in Hollywood, that knows what they want. The biggest problem kind of for screenwriters is dealing with people that don't know what they want. And so it's hard to really please a director or producer when they don't know what they want. And so that's a big bone of contention for a lot of us here. Yes, sir.
What advice do you have?
I think we got a mic coming for you, bro.
What advice do you have for students here aspiring to be filmmakers and directors like you?
Well, I think you got to make films. You got to make your movies. The big thing about making movies is the script. It's hard to make a great film from a bad script. So one of the things that I did with my small films is I was writing scripts based on what I knew I had access to. So don't just write a script where it's like, and then they go to Egypt. So I would, probably my best example of this is Planet Negro, Destination Planet Negro. It's a little movie. I made that movie for $7,000, and it's on Amazon. And the movie is about black folks in 1939 they're frustrated, black folks catching hell in America. So they have a meeting of all the black leaders, and they say, what's going to be the solution to our problem? And they say, let's go to Mars. So George Washington Carver creates a rocket fuel with a peanut and a sweet potato. And they build a rocket ship, and then they take off to go to Mars. And unfortunately, they go through some kind of time thing, and they end up here today with a black president, Obama. So that premise allowed me to talk about how far black folks have come and how far we still need to go. And one of the things for me in my life was that my father was 60 when I was born. My father was born in 1898. So I grew up around old people. And so my father was born only like 30 so years after slavery. So I got to kind of hear from him and his friends a lot of history, a lot of what black folks had gone through at that time. And so I thought a lot about when Obama was running for president, and then when he won, I thought a lot about if my parents had still been alive, what would they have said about him being president, right? So that was the premise of the film. And I didn't want to go through the whole rigmarole of trying to persuade Hollywood to get this movie. I didn't think they'd really understand it. So I just did it myself. I got my buddies together at KU, and we did this thing. And I wrote it. I played one of the characters in it because I knew I would show up. And so that's the approach you have to take, is you have to write it to the things you have. So when I was writing scenes, I'm writing scenes and I'm thinking how I'm going to shoot it. I'm thinking, oh, I got this location. Oh, I can get that location. Oh, so-and-so has this. Oh, so-and-so's good at that. He can build that for me. Oh, I can get one of those for free. Oh, there's this one location outside of town that looks like a desert. I'm going to use that to play as if it's a desert kind of thing. So as much as you can, write a script with the resources you have around you that you kind of know you have. And obviously, the first thing you got to do is kind of create a premise to a story that is challenging, interesting, has some fire and meat to it, right? When you're doing independent films, that really matters a great deal because you can't compete with big Hollywood movies. The little guy can't compete with Hollywood, but you can do what they aren't doing. That's what the independent filmmaker does. He tells the stories that they're afraid to tell. You know, CSA, Confederate States of America, great example of that. So I made my film Confederate States. I made that movie for about $300,000 in the end. Another quick filmmaker story for you. So I made the film for about $30,000. And then I got to Sundance, but I didn't own any of the stock footage that I'm using in the movie. So when we sell the movie, I'm hoping to use some of the money from selling the movie to pay for the stock footage. And so I sold the movie at Sundance, not owning all of the movie, but then took the money I got from selling it to go buy the footage. And that's what a hustler does. Because you don't wait for permission. You don't sit around and go, well, I don't have the footage, so I guess I can't make the film. Oh, well, golly gee, right? And there's no stock footage prison. There's no stock footage prison, right? So as long as you know you're gonna give them, but as long as you're not making money off that film, everything's cool. The minute you start making money on it, you gotta buy that footage. Okay? So you gotta figure things out like that for yourself and not let things stop you from doing your thing, right? So the big thing is write it to the resources that you have access to. You gotta go find actors. You gotta go find, I did plays in Kansas City at the Coterie Theater, and doing those plays there, I met a lot of great actors, and so I built a little kind of, network of actors I worked with on my films. And you need that. You need to know actors, and they need to be your friends, and you need to be looking for great actors all the time. One of my former students, Trey Byers, went to KU, is in my film Destination Planet Negro, and also in my new movie called The 24th. He's also one of the brothers of one of the main characters on the TV show Empire. He's Andre Lyon on that show. So you never know who is around here that has got, potential. And you can be the guy or the gal that gives them a break, gives them big things that helps them along the way.
Hi
Yes.
there. Hey, so later today they're having a conversation called like cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. And given your work and your personal interests, and again, your work in Hollywood, what would you have to say about that kind of conversation?
Say it one more time for me.
So later today, I think it's actually in here, I'm not really sure. But anyways, a conversation of cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation. And so with your work, your personal interests, your time in Hollywood, what do you think about a conversation of that nature?
Sure, that's a good conversation to have. I'm gonna let you hold this one. The problem of I know my man. We go way back. Cultural appropriation is a problem, right? It's a problem. It's been a problem, kind of ever since Elvis Presley kind of was ripping off, Chuck Berry, right? And it's kind of the most sincerest form of flattery is getting ripped off in a way. But you're still getting ripped off. So I think you need to kind of be aware of it. I think, I think young people especially are very sensitive to that now, which I think is a really good thing. You got to be careful not to go too far back the other way, where I see white people say, I like to tell this story about black folks, but I'm afraid to tell it. And one of my favorite films is a movie called Nothing But a Man. Great film from the 1960s. And still holds up really well today, if you get a chance to see it. And it's made by a guy named Michael Romer. And Michael Romer was a German Jew. And so he's not black, but he told this amazing black story. And so we want to be careful not to just dismiss people that may be able to tell us something about ourselves that we sometimes can't see ourselves in that way. And everybody's got insight, and everybody's got got things to offer. And so, you know, you've got to be able to tell the difference between appropriation and theft. And when somebody has had an experience, I think Michael Romer in this case, the fact that he was a German Jew, had to flee Germany, had dealt with oppression, you know, had dealt with things himself, and I think that made him connect with the black experience. So I think we just have to be careful about that. And I think, you know, it's kind of like a case-by-case basis a little bit, you know, if that makes sense. You know, you should kind of hear the person out. I don't think it's ever good when people feel like, oh, I just can't do that. Well, you know, you need to think about it, and maybe after thinking about it, you shouldn't do it. But maybe you should do it in a certain way. So, but I think that there have been a lot of white folks that have been involved in telling our stories that have done good jobs. There have been a lot of folks that have done awful jobs. And so, you know, we've got to be aware and careful about that.
Several years ago, there was a KU professor that wanted or ordered a taping to be made of several African students pretending to be on a slave ship, speaking in their own language, crying the agony of being taken to slavery. Was that you? Did you order that?
No, that's the first time I've ever heard of that. And are you asking my opinion on that?
No, I'm asking if you were the one requiring it for one of your movies, because I was one of the participants, so I know that it was made.
Yeah, no, I don't know anything about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey.
So, what has your experience been like handling the success that's come from this film, and what was it like when you found out you won the Academy Award? Like, what were like some of the things that were going through your mind? What was your family's reaction? So, could you just kind of like talk about that?
Sure. I hate talking about that. No, getting nominated. Well, first I'll back up a little bit. Talk about being nominated was a trip, right? That's a trip in itself. And so the thing that Spike and I and the other two writers and all the people that kind of were involved in the film, we all said we're not going to talk about it. So we don't talk about it. Other people might talk about it, but we weren't going to talk about it. So I never said anything public. If someone asked me, I said, oh yeah, it's great. That's about all I said. And I think that's a good way of handling it, you know? I mean, it's pretty heady stuff, and there's no guarantee you're gonna get nominated, so you could be saying, oh yeah, I think we did a great job, and then you don't get nominated. It's like, yeah, suck and see what happened, right? You know, so that was big. And then when we did get nominated, that really made us clam up even more. And so you just try to ignore it almost. But the thing about what happens when you get nominated is that there's a big, huge campaign to get you to win. So you have to go do events all over LA and New York, any place that they are Academy voters. So the Focus Films, which is associated with Universal Studios. So that's who produced our film. So they send you to all kind of events to have you talk about the film and all of that in hopes that you're convincing Academy voters to vote for you. So that's a lot of work that goes with that. I was traveling all over the country during that time, and it's about a 3-month campaign really. And that's a lot of fun, but it is work, you know. I have a friend of mine that says there's no crying on the yacht, so don't feel bad about you know this is a good problem to have, right? Real good problem to have. And then when the night that of the ceremony, so when you watch a TV at home, it comes on like 7 o'clock or something, I think, right? Like 6 or 7 or something like that, right? But in LA, it's like 3 o'clock. So it's in the afternoon. And so, you know, I'll back up a little bit. The red carpet, so, you know, our film won the Grand Prix at Cannes, at the Cannes Film Festival. The red carpet at Cannes was just mind-blowing. You know, I mean, I'm just a country boy from Junction City, right? And it was just like, my God. And the theater there, and they gave us like a 5-10 minute standing ovation at Cannes. And so that was an amazing experience, right? And then when we had this experience at the Academy Awards, you know, it's great. It is truly, truly great. But I kind of knew the deal now a little bit. And my two girls were with me, and so we had a lot of fun. So you're sitting there, and the good thing about being the favorite is that you might win. The bad thing about being the favorite is you might have a long ride back to Lawrence, Kansas, right? So you know, you're sitting there, and when Samuel L. Jackson came out, I said, this is either really good or really bad, because him and Spike are really close. So one of the things I noticed is that the person who kind of gives the award when you win a lot of times has a connection to you. I saw that in other award shows we'd gone to. So when I saw that, I went, well, this could either be, I hope they're not gonna just hurt Spike's feelings horribly here, right? So when we won, and they told us when you win, you gotta like get up there immediately because the clock is ticking. You know, then they play the music and time to get off deal, right? So the clock starts ticking the minute they call your name. So you've gotta, so I could barely was out of my seat and Spike was already jumping in Samuel L. Jackson's arms, right? And my wife said, you didn't kiss me or tell me anything. It's like, they told me to get up there. I was like, get up there right now, you know? So it was, you know, it was a great moment. It was a really great moment. And, you know, it's, you know, I feel incredibly fortunate. I mean, it's, you know, when you're a kid and you're watching that at home with your mom. My father was, you know, he didn't go to the movies. My father just worked. But my mother was a big movie person, and I could talk to her about movies. And so, you know, spending all those years watching the show with her, it was a great thing.
Earlier, you were talking about how to kind of deal with criticism and how you kind of got to dismiss negativity. At the same time, some of the criticism, you know, some of these people might have things to offer you. How do you kind of process or approach criticism so that you don't, you know, shut too much out to where you're kind of not open to new ideas and, you know, things that might actually help? How do you kind of approach criticism?
That's a little tricky. That's a great question. That's a little tricky. I think every situation is different. If it's written criticism, that's great. Sometimes you'll get verbal criticism from somebody that you've got to kind of process. I think you have to kind of, you know, be well aware of what your intents are with whatever art you are doing. So your intent is really important. And so I think that's the point of view I process things from. What was I intending to do with this? What was I trying to say? What reaction was I trying to get? And so that's kind of a big part of it. And so knowing kind of what you think and what your point of view is helps you to kind of process whatever criticisms coming your way. I think if you don't know that, that can be really detrimental to you. So first of all, you gotta kind of know that. And then from there, you can kind of weigh what people are saying, whether, you know, it's like, you might tell me something that doesn't acknowledge what my intent was, and so I have to weigh whether or not that makes sense or not. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So it's a tricky thing, and each person's review or idea of what you're doing is going to be different. And you've got to, you know, if they're playing fair with you, I think you have an obligation to play fair back. If they're not playing fair with you, then don't go there. Don't even acknowledge it. So that's kind of how I do it. We got some folks over here too. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. So I just had a question about you starting off with like college, going to like, I didn't know if you said you went to community first and then transferred to university, but was it a problem with figuring out what you wanted to do? And when you moved so far away with like paying for how to survive and how
Right.
much the college was?
Yeah, well, I went to school in the late 70s and early 80s. And back then, America wanted you to go to school. And so America really doesn't want you to go to school anymore. You know, you get socked with all this debt, and it's so unfair. By the way, there's a good movie out there about student debt, a good heist movie about student debt. Just laying it out there. I mean, you can take it, run with it. It's y'all's. But there's a good movie about somebody who's in major debt from school, who then robs the bank that is socking all this. Anyway. So for me it was, I knew I worked a couple years before I went to school. That helped a lot because I knew I wanted to do something in film or theater or act. Didn't quite know for sure. And theater was the closest. At that time, there was no film school around here. So theater was the closest thing I could get to it. And my theater training has been really good for me because it taught me a lot about dialogue and character development, and even knowing how to act a little bit is helpful. So that was good. That was really good. Even though I had kids and I was married, I was able to find a way. And one thing Junction City taught me was hustling. My mother would have, black folks in the audience, y'all know the game Tonk, the card game Tonk? It's an old folks game. My mother would have Tonk games at our house, and it was like a casino at our house. And she would, and I'm gonna make a movie about this at some point, and I would have to give my mother money to for the house money. And I worked at Alco Discount Center. Some of the old folks out here probably know Alco. And so that taught me hustling. So the good thing about that is that most filmmakers, you're a freelancer on some level. And what I mean by a freelancer, you're working on your own. You're an independent contractor. And so that you've got to have to hustle the things for yourself. So you got to hustle the money to make the film. If you're trying to work as a grip or a gaffer in this area, you have to kind of get out and get into the network where film's being made and learn where the opportunities are. That's hustling, really. So you can't be shy, you can't be introverted, you got to let people know what you're trying to do, what you want, what you're after. You got to really plant your flag. Don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed, don't be afraid to fail. And then it gets easier. It's hard for everybody in the beginning, but the more you kind of do it, the easier it becomes. So I think the big thing is just do it. Just find a way to do it, Don't let anything stop you. Find a way to do it. But before you just jump off the bridge, just know exactly what you want and what exactly you're after. And that's hard to know, but work at squeezing it down so that it's a real clear thing as much as you can. And that's about all we can do,
Quick question. You said one of the first things you did was you bought the soundtrack for movies. Can you talk about how you collaborate with musicians, with music composers?
Great. So she's asking about how filmmakers collaborate with composers and all that. That's a really great question. Well, I think everybody does it differently, but the great thing about when you really get to work with a real composer, someone who really knows movie music, is that they're going to kind of tell you what they think, and you're going to tell them what you think. And if you get to choose someone that has a great kind of track record and a great, catalog of amazing work, then that helps a lot, obviously. A lot of times when you're first starting out making films, you're going to be working with people that are trying to get started too. So the thing to always remember when you don't have resources to make your film, everybody's trying to get started. Everybody's looking for an opportunity. And so if you write a really great script that people are willing, writing the script for the independent filmmaker, for the folks out here trying to get started, the script is the money in the bank. If you write a really great script, that's worth a lot of money. I'm not talking about selling it. I'm talking about in terms of people attracting all the people you need to make the film. So if you've got that, then it's good to then work with a composer because they're going to read the script and they're going to go, I want to work with this. I see images, I hear things already just reading the script. And so then it's kind of a back and forth. You kind of tell them what your intent is in the scene, and then they kind of tell you how they would maybe do that. Then there are people that are kind of called music supervisors. So the music you hear in movies, the pop music and the old soundtrack music and things like that in movies, that's usually put there by the music supervisor. So the music supervisor, you bring them on and they look at the film and they go, like in Black Klansman, that scene where they're dancing, and that's a really hip scene. The music supervisor, he was really one of the best in the industry. He suggested the music there. I think it's Brother Cornelius and Sister Rose, that song. So that's something that you don't have to wait to be involved with big movies to do. You can be doing that now.
So you're an actor, screenwriter, and director. So just on a personal level, what's the most exciting part of your process? Is it finding the next project? Is it working with the actors? Is it getting the set? Is it doing the research?
It's kind of twofold in a way for me. I think it's typically writing the script is the most exciting part because that's the screenplay is the blueprint to make the film. It's important to remember that. The screenplay is the blueprint to make the film. And, if without a good blueprint, you're going to have a failed film. So you really kind of, I really enjoy that part of it because if you can nail that, then you got something to work with, right? And then probably from there would be, when you get to start shooting and when you get to direct. And, they always talk about how, well, this is a good thing to know. There's the movie you write, there's the movie you shoot, and there's the movie you edit. And there are 3 different films. And so some folks don't really know that, and that's an important thing to know because with each step, you're typically compromising, things change. You're writing it, and the writing is the purest form of it because when you get to write it, it's like, this is exactly what I think it should be. And then when you get to shoot it, it's like, well, you don't have the money for that, so we got to change that, or we couldn't get that location, we got to change that, or so-and-so, And then the movie you edit, the editor is an art form too. So they give Academy Awards to editors because editors come in and then they go, what if we move this scene here? And you go, oh, shoot, that is so cool. And that's what an editor does.
Oh. What advice do you have for me being a woman going into film, but not only that, also being a woman of color going into film?
Well, it's probably the best time it's ever been for women of color in film. And kind of the last few years, kind of what my frustration early on when I got started was that studios were the thing and studios only did so much. That's really changed because of Netflix and Amazon and now Apple TV and all of that stuff because it's just broken things up and the studios don't like that very much either, by the way. That's why I don't believe a streaming service has won an Academy Award for Best Picture yet. They were really trying hard with The Irishman. So it's a good time right now. So, but the same thing I think applies, that applies to every other filmmaker, which is, you know, really get great at your craft. If you want to direct, you should be making films right now. You should be getting better at it, and you should just become the best director you can. If you want to write, the same thing applies. And I think the more that, and don't be afraid to talk about black women in your movies. Don't be afraid to kind of talk about things that are important to you. I mean, I talk about the things that I care about. You should be talking about the things that you care about. Typically, what they want now is they want you to express who you are. And so don't imitate someone else. I mean, we all get influenced, right? I mean, you know, I love the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? But you should be working on developing your voice and the things that you care about and the things that you want to say and how you want to say them, right? And the more you do that, I think the better shot you have of getting a break.
Thank you so much for everyone that came here. It was a very big event. Can we give Kevin Willmott a big round of applause for coming to Johnson County Community?